And I kind of found something frustrating, I suppose, about all of those things. I'm exciting too, but frustrating. And so it led me to start looking for ways that I could take the company into sort of new areas. And we'd been doing some work with live sound reactive graphics, and we'd done quite a few pop shows, things like the Brits and Smash Hits and stuff that were, you know, big and fun, but technically very simple and aesthetically not kind of very exciting. But using that, I went to see a chap called Darshan Singh Bulla, who's a choreographer, well-known choreographer, who at the time was artistic director of a company called Phoenix Dance Theatre. And I said to him, look, you know, we've done all this sort of pop work. We'd love to try to work collaboratively in dance and try and create a piece that could be very exciting, I hope. And he had the kind of freedom and creativity and vision to kind of say, well, okay, let's go for it. And so we came up with an idea, which he was putting together a program for a tour, and there were two very weighty, serious contemporary dance pieces on the program. And I think one of the reasons that he was able to treat this so kind of generously was that he saw it as a throwaway piece, and in seeing it as a throwaway piece, he actually kind of let go a lot of his own control over the dance. And so what we ended up making was a piece that would have made absolutely no sense if you just saw the dance, and it made absolutely no sense if you just saw the visuals. So it ended up being an absolute collaboration between visual movement and physical movement. They, as a company, you know, paid us, but in every other way, it was a real collaboration. What I found hugely exciting, I'll just very quickly explain the working process. We had about 8 weeks to make the piece, and we would go in, Tom and I would go into the dance rehearsals 1 day a week, and we were using live technologies that we developed. So although I was joking about it takes us 5 minutes to make things red, we tried to kind of circumnavigate that as much as possible by being able to actually sort of manipulate the images and the what we call sprites, which are sort of digital puppets that the dancers were playing with, and we could manipulate all those in real time. So what it allowed for us to do was to go in 1 day a week and play with, and this is well, in fact, just before I get to that, yeah, this was the rehearsal setup, and we basically had a gauze at the front and screens at the back, so the dancers were sandwiched in this kind of virtual box. And these were really early rehearsals. This is what I'm talking about now. So we could project in front of them, we could project behind them, and we could synchronize the movement between the two. And we were doing all of this very early stuff live, so that, as I say, we could play and we could see movement that looked interesting and respond to it immediately and throw up an idea. And this is where it kind of links, I think, to a lot of what you were saying, in that that actually an awful lot of the creative process, in fact all the creative process probably, was about editing. Because the ideas could be created so quickly and so fluidly, because people move so fast on the whole, and the dancers are so well trained to the way that they think. And the ideas came from everybody. They came from Darshan as the choreographer, they came from the dancers, they came from us. And there was this real sense of, you know, oh, that's interesting, why don't we try this? And, you know, and ideas sort of kept shooting out. And then what we would do is we'd film it all and take those ideas away, and then slowly kind of analyze them and look at them and go, do you know what, that's interesting, and we could take that little bit from there, and that little bit there is interesting, and sort of put them together, and then slowly develop them visually into much more sophisticated ideas. And then we take them back the next week and sort of say, okay, so now this is how that bit works, and then they would kind of rehearse and choreograph around that. And then the little bits that began to have some kind of cohesion and solidity then began to inform the process of making the other bits. So in the end, by the end of this process, we ended up, I think, with something that actually had quite a lot of cohesion and sat together as a piece quite well, but that had all been created out of a kind of multitude of these little serendipitous moments, really, of just play. And I don't think there would have been any other way you could have done it for a piece like this, because the interaction was so great. I mean, funny enough, we're right in the middle at the moment of making a new piece with the same choreographer, which is entirely different. I mean, it's still a collaboration, but the relationship between the movement of the visuals and the dancers is much more divorced. And so in a way it's much easier to work. We're not having to go through this process. But in also another way, it's actually kind of less engaging. It's less fun. So the live technologies allowed for this kind of immediacy, this serendipitous discovery and the playfulness that I've just been talking about. What we did was once we'd seen an idea, we edited it, we developed it, and cast it into stone, if you like. The spotting of potential ideas had to be done very quickly, and once it was done, then we kind of had to make commitments to it. And as I say, that then kind of informed the stylistic development of the whole piece. The key elements in making the collaboration work, from my point of view, I think were, first of all, risk. I think the fact that we moved our kind of very safe working environment into a completely new environment, a strange space like a dance rehearsal room. And on day one, I remember thinking very strongly, like, this could be hugely embarrassing, because we had very little certainty that what we were going to try and do could work at all. And there's this. I mean, this slide, it just shows the kind of that weird juxtaposition between kind of banks of computers and people somehow. And the second, which I think was the one that got us out of that fear, was playfulness. That there was, I think, an acknowledgement that none of us could afford to be precious about any of the ideas, and because of the way that the dancers worked, there was this sort of element of play and a lot of laughter and a lot of joking, and a lot of the best ideas probably came out of those kind of moments of complete silliness. And I think it goes back to something you were saying about the I and the we, that actually the ideas were very shared. I don't think anyone could ultimately have said that was my idea, or that was my idea, or that was their idea. And that was a huge part, actually, again, of making the collaboration work, that the kind of egos were all left at the door, and that it was the process that made the piece. Which, I mean, goes to my other thing. I think good collaboration absolutely requires trust, which is, knowing a good idea when you see it, and not worrying about whose idea it was, but just saying, look, do you know what, that really works. So we ended up this process with a piece that was absolutely a product of the process, and absolutely, as I say, very hard to say that was this idea, that was your idea, that was mine. And it toured, and it completely changed our working life, really, because as a result of the piece, we then got offered all sorts of new work, and including a lot of TV commercials initially, from somebody who a TV director went and saw the piece at Sadler's Wells and just said it's the most exciting thing they'd seen for ages. And I think that was very generous. I don't think that was necessarily true at all, but I think it had a freshness because of the process by which it had been made, that made it look different from most things that you would normally go and see. And that then led on to the film work, and we almost, in fact, again, as a direct result of the Sadler's Wells show, we got a commission from the ICA to do the Trafalgar Square piece, which then turned out to be another collaboration with another choreographer, but in an entirely different realm. I think I may have some pictures of that, actually. These are just more dancers. Yeah, this is just a picture of Trafalgar Square, mayhem. And so for the last 2 years, we have almost totally been working collaboratively, all within the performing arts, and enjoying the process immensely. So that, for what it's worth, is just a kind of a very short description of a journey from being a sort of internet company to a performing arts company.
Amazing.